Address the people directly, which is what he is really good at. His community organizer spirit came in that speech, in my belief.
And so did his spirit of becoming or of being a history student. Let's take a listen.
As a student of history, I also know civilization's debt to Islam. It was Islam at places like Uluzara that carried the light of learning through so many centuries, paving the way for Europe's Renaissance and Enlightenment. It was innovation in Muslim communities. It was innovation in Muslim communities that developed the order of algebra, our magnetic compass and tools of navigation, our mastery of pens and printing, our understanding of how disease spreads and how it can be healed. Islamic culture has given us majestic arches and soaring spires, timeless poetry and cherished music, elegant calligraphy, and places of peaceful contemplation. And throughout history, Islam has demonstrated through words and deeds the possibilities of religious tolerance and racial equality.
I love that poetry, but boy, did I struggle with algebra. Hussein, why the history lesson?
You know, I think it's important to realize that what President Obama was doing was not just talking about the history of Muslims in America and the history of Muslims in the world, but the history of Muslims throughout the world. I think you have to see this as part of a larger whole. He's talking about the fact that Venetian architecture in Italy comes from learnings it took from the Eastern world, that you had Arabic learning present in Europe. And at the same time, when you look at President Obama starting his speech talking about Al-Azhar University and Cairo University, he's talking about the borrowings from Europe into the Arab Muslim world. And so I think what he's doing is he's reminding us that we're in a moment of crisis right now, but that this moment can't define our past and our future. We've had long histories of cooperation, of cohabitation, of interaction that we can continue to develop and foster. And that just because we're at a low point right now in religious relationships doesn't mean that we can't build up to something greater again.
Perfect segue. Well, while you mentioned that on Hussein, interesting that you talk about the issue of democracy. Hussein, before we roll into our next section of subject matter, since Zainab brought it up, you know, that's been one of the biggest controversies, is that the U.S. president has always tried to force countries in the Middle East to be democratic when history hasn't always been that way. And that's been a big tug of war, is don't make us be what you want us to be.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that it's not always forcing. You know, America has not always forced democracy on other countries. It is, in fact, tried to espouse its values. You know, when Reverend John Winthrop said it, when President Kennedy said it, when Secretary of State Clinton said it, to be a shining beacon on a hill in describing America, the idea was that we as a country would represent ourselves as a moral exemplar that people would want to be. We've had periods where we've tried to force freedom and democracy on others, and that strikes me as a bit odd, trying to force freedom on other people. At the same time, we also prop up despotic regimes like the Mubarak regime, like the certain other royal families in the Middle East. And, you know, so we do have this conflicting notion. I think what President Obama did today was wonderful, which was to say, we are going to go back to being that shining beacon on a hill, that shining city on the hill, and we are going to show you a way that we think is a good way, and we want you to be democratic in your way, but not in name only. So
we're going to talk more about that oppression. That's going to be the next key item. We're going to key in. A chance to respond to this. It's very, I guess it's hard for me as an American woman, and there are Muslim women that say to me it's hard for them to see, but then I've also talked with Muslim women in countries saying, well, that's just how it is. This is how women are supposed to be. This is the role. This is what we've had for centuries. But then again, we're in 2009 and the world is so different. I mean, how do you make sense of it?
I think I just want to echo some of the comments that have been made already. We can't assume that there's one rule or one way Muslim women are supposed to be. If we look at Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto is elected twice as head of state. Turkey has had a head of state. Indonesia has had a head of state. Bangladesh has had 2 female heads of state. So clearly women aren't just meant to be, Muslim women aren't just meant to be at home. They are meant to be out there, meant to get educated. If you look at the roles women have played in Muslim history, you can't get away from the impact they've had, from the Prophet's first wife, Khadija, who supported him and who was a very successful businesswoman, jumping to the modern period. A lot of people don't realize that the first president of the League of Nations was a Muslim, Sultan Muhammad Shah, who called for greater access for education for women throughout the world. About a year ago, when President Obama was running and people were trying to say, well, he might be a Muslim and that's a bad thing, somebody asked me, well, what do you hope to see 5 years, 10 years from now? I said, in 35 years from now, I want to see my daughter be able to run for president of the United States and not question whether she's Muslim or not, or why she is or is not wearing hijab. Those are her rights as an American, and those are her rights as a Muslim. And we really need to keep that in mind. When we look at the Saudi state, which is the example you used, we have to realize that there are two components. There's the political side and the religious, quote-unquote, religious authorities. And when we look at the religious authorities, they're afraid. They're afraid of difference. And that difference means women, that difference means Shia, that difference means minorities of any sort. And so they don't want to give up that power. They want women to be victims of abuse. They want to repress minorities because it allows them to keep power. But I think we also have to understand that women also have to be agitating for their rights at the same time as well.
Well, I know Zainab and Sumaya are doing that. Hussein, great insight. We're going to talk again, guys. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, we want to get straight to the streets of the Muslim world while we can.
I think that it's important to realize that there's no distinction between being Muslim and American. And when President Obama is speaking to the Muslim world, as he said, he's speaking to Americans as well. There's religious extremism in every faith community. We need to move beyond that. There's a history of living and working together. We need to move towards that. And I want to end the same way our president began this morning with Assalamu alaikum.
We're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much to all three of you, Zainab Salbi, Hussein Rashid, and Sumaya Khalifa. Shukran to all three of you.
Thank you.
Well, like the rest of the world, the Egyptian economy is facing many challenges. Growth is slowing, and there are big